Welcome to another Mystical Perspective. My name is Reverend Cindy Paulus. Thank you for joining us today. And today's subject matter is the greater you. Now, we all sense that there is this greater presence. We all have moments when we're in touch with that presence and we sense what our true self is, our soul. Today we're going to be talking about that. It's part of the Spiritual Mind Power Affirmations book by Dr. Paul Leon Masters. I start with affirmations and then we go into a talk and explore the aspects of this and follow it up with a meditation. So starting with the greater you affirmations, the lesser or false you. I recognize that the lesser or false me is that which is not eternal and subject to temporary and fleeting states of selfhood and cycles of life with corresponding limitations. Now, we all know we have to get up in the morning, we do what we do, we go around, and a lot of times that's just time spent. It's the dash between the day we're born and the day on the gravestone we die. There's a lot of those dashes. But in between the dashes, and hopefully every morning when you get up, there's moments where you connect to the greater you, that part that shines and connects to something that is from the one source of all. So starting with the lesser or false you again, repeating, I recognize that the lesser or false me is that which is not eternal and subject to temporary and fleeting states of selfhood and cycles of life with corresponding limitations. Now, as we begin to see and connect with our higher self again, we start to understand how it is that we have this everyday bodily get through life personality, and then we have the higher self. And it's interesting how through time we can merge those two aspects of ourselves. The next one's the greater me. I recognize and accept that there is a changeless and eternal part of me that is the Christ mind of my mind's beingness, or that which is one with God, and thus the greater me. Now, so here we're kind of defining, in sorts, what that part of the greater you is. And one of the greatest ways to identify with it is to recognize it, right? Repeating that, I recognize and accept that there is a changeless and eternal part of me that is the Christ mind of mind's beingness, or that which is one with God, and thus the greater me. The affirmation now is oneness. I recognize that the greater Christ part of me, one with God, is capable through oneness to manifest the greater me in my life. How important is this, right? To recognize not only that there is the greater me, but that it is capable through knowing that I am one with that I can manifest that oneness, that greater me, in my life. So that's the key here. The oneness is definitely a key, right? Because we couldn't do it unless we were part of it. And we know enough to know that all of us are created from energy. We all have very similar DNAs. We also all have this God part of us, each and every one. And in that part, we are all one, and we can then recognize this oneness. Again, repeating, I recognize that the greater Christ part of me, one with God, is capable through oneness to manifest the greater me in my life. Release daily. I recognize And I release any and all sense of lesser, limited, false selfhood to the light of God's presence within me, that it be sublimated into the greater Christ God beingness with which I am one. So this is part of a transformation process, right? So if you daily release that lower aspect of yourself to the higher aspect of yourself, and you merge yourself with the higher aspect of the light of God's presence, then you are allowing that light of the higher presence to then become merged with your own and make that inner connection, which can be manifested outwardly. So repeating that one, release. Daily I release any and all sense of lesser, limited, false selfhood to the light of God's presence within me, that it be sublimated into the greater Christ God beingness with which I am one. Will. Daily I open myself to God's will within me that is, in truth, the will of my greater Christ selfhood. Now, by doing this with will, of course, we're allowing our ego self and the lower personality self to be directed towards what we really are, the higher God self. Repeating will. Daily I open myself to God's will within me that is, in truth, the will of my greater Christ selfhood. And it's important, too, with that, to realize that when we do this, we're recognizing that this is possible. Because part of our ego and part of our lower self is wanting to deny and will deny that it is possible. We will fight, actually, to deny that it's possible. But the greater will, God's will, says yes, 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 yes. So we have to learn to say yes to that. Meditation. Through my daily practice of meditation, my greater Christ mind self is energized in body, mind, and soul. Repeating that, through my daily practice of meditation, my greater Christ mind self is energized in body, mind, and soul. So this is an important part that we always express, how important daily meditation is. And sometimes people go, well, I've been doing it for a while, I don't see any major differences. I don't feel connected. It's not like it's a one-day thing. It can be. There are times where you totally get transformed, and it's like that relationship you have when you fall in love with God, right? And you just get swept off your feet. But even that goes through a period of time, and then it becomes an everyday thing. But the everyday part is what's so important. Even when you don't think that there's changes happening. And it's so important to not give in to just thinking the lower self is who you are, which happens more and more when we direct our energy towards that. So meditation is always, always, always a very important part of our life, a daily important part of our life. Visualization next here. I daily take a few moments to visualize or imagine that the interior of my body is filled with God's Christ-like body of my greater self. Now, what are we doing? Now, visualization, we all know how important visualization is. We're actually creating imagery that we can then step into, and the light body is one that we create that we can step into when we leave our physical body behind. If you read any of these books about people who have had near-death experiences, they look down at their body and they just don't even hardly recognize it. It's not identified with them at all. It's just some body that they're not connected to. But the light self that they go into totally feels like a great place to be. We can work on building that light body through our daily visualization. So repeating, I daily take time to visualize or imagine that the interior of my body is filled with God's Christ-like body of my greater self. Material needs, my greater Christ mind self, one with God, who knows my material needs before I ask, supplies me with all that I truly need for good of my soul and therefore my body and my mind. So this is the ultimate in faith and trust, right? If we're giving ourselves over to the one source of all, to God, are we having the faith and trust? I mean, of course, the beautiful Christ statement about consider the lily of the fields. And how beautiful they are without any concern, right? I mean, think of us and how we are supplied with what we need when we are in tune with that one. So repeating this, my greater Christ mind self, one with God, who knows my material needs before I ask, supplies me with all that I truly need for the good of my soul and therefore my body and mind. So turn your whole life over to God. Believe that you are in that light of God. Allow yourself to identify with that higher self. And know that you are going to be in that place where you are going to be all right, in the light, right? The next one's love. I affirm that my greater self is one with God's presence of love and therefore attracts love into my human life. Repeating that. I affirm that my greater self is one with God's presence of love, and therefore attracts love into my human life. So love is a great magnet, right? We know that. When you're in love, the whole world loves you. You love the whole world. You know, and there's this amazing transformation that happens. People can tell you look different, you feel different, you're happier. Until you become miserable. That's with the physical love happens many times. That does not last. But God's love, God's unconditional love does last. God's unconditional love feeds your heart and your soul. It feeds your life. And it is one with that God presence of love. And it attracts the additional love into your life. And health. I realize that my greater Christ mind is always aware of the greatest perfection of health with which the greater Christ part of myself is one. Now, we know that there's many, many aspects to health, right? And there's many things that affect our health. But when we align with that perfect light, there's an amazing healing that comes about. It's amazing to me how many people do practice Reiki and light healing. And they find that when they're in that state of aligned with that light healing, that they themselves are also healed, right? So we can be healthy when we realize that our greater Christ mind is always aware of the greatest perfection of health with which the greater Christ part of myself is one. And happiness is the last affirmation here. The greater me exists in an ever ongoing state of happiness because of my Christ mind oneness with the eternal God part of me. So when we're in love and when we're aligned with that Christ, we can see the power of that light and love. We're aligned with that power of that light and love. We're in the state of happiness where happiness comes from. Repeating this, the greater me exists in an ever ongoing state of happiness because of my Christ mind oneness with the eternal God part of me. So obviously there's a lot of value to practicing being aligned with this greater you and to even understand and connect with that greater you. What was that song? The greatest love of all is waiting there inside of me. Remember that one? But the greater you is something that you really can align with. And this is what we've been talking about. How do you feel that presence? Can you visualize what that spirit that you don't see can be alive in you, and how it can be alive in you? Can you really reach up and find that oneness, that beautiful chalice of light that is there? And can you find that eternal light and love and let yourself be completely transformed by that amazing energy that restores you to eternal life? It's all possible. But you have to believe, right? Because there is this beautiful magic of spirit, and there is this presence of the Christ light. And when you feel it, you realize the power of it. You are indeed touched by God, and you're not alone. And you find so many blessings that can begin to appear in your life in many, many ways. It can be the subtleness of how you sense the beauty of nature. You can feel that spirit in the wind. It's amazing that you actually can be aligned with that presence. And you can embrace it, and it indeed will embrace you back. It's really the muse of all the muses. It inspires you. It lets you know, and it infuses you with a spark of light from the soul. It leads you to really that wonderful breath of God that you can breathe and become one with. But what limits us? What is that part that says, oh no, this is not true, this isn't happening? It's the ego. It's what gets us into that place of thinking we're the one, our lower self, our mind, our life is the one that's in control. And that ego has many ways of tricking it. In fact, it's called the trickster in the Native American beliefs. And it does trick you. It can get you to the point where you don't really align with God, because you block it out because you're afraid and you're not thinking you're worthy enough for that amazing light and love that you truly are with that I am presence. It's interesting because someone was talking about this the other day, and I shared that story so often shared about the two wolves. Which do you feed? Do you feed that lower self, the ego, or do you feed the greater you? And I'm sure you've heard this story. One evening, an elderly Cherokee brave told his grandson about a battle that goes on inside people. He said, "My son, the battle between two wolves is inside us all. One is evil. It's anger, envy, jealousy, sorrow, regret, greed, arrogance, self-pity, guilt, resentment, inferiority, lies, false pride, superiority, and ego. The other is good. It is joy, peace, love, hope, serenity, humility, kindness, and benevolence, empathy, generosity, truth, compassion, and faith." And the grandson thought about it for a minute and then asked the grandfather, which wolf wins? And the old Cherokee simply replied, the one that you feed. So what are you feeding in your life? Are you feeding that amazing greater part of you, or are you feeding that other ego part of you? And you have to do that and really go into meditation in the silence and let yourself be free to reach that place of ultimate infinite light and that energy of unconditional love. And you got to let that energy completely wash you clean of the other part. You need to really always carry out, no matter where you are in your mind, that protocol of believing and calling upon spirit and going within and meditating, and ask yourself, who am I serving? Am I serving God? Am I serving the greater part of me? Or am I serving my personality? So, in a few words, you need to say, how are you defining yourself? Are you defining yourself as being a servant of God? Do you see yourself as loving and compassionate? Or are you seeing yourself as depressed and unsuccessful or not making it? The truth of who you are is really that you are a reflection of God. And in the greatest scheme of things, you are the one that's there beyond the mind and beyond your lower identity, beyond your credit card, beyond your driver's license and your passport. You realize that the ego's nothing more than a collection of responses of your insecurities and your fears and your doubts. And you can shed it when you connect to your true inner self. And not in an egotistical way, but in a very humble way, recognizing that spirit of who you are is God. It is part of the universe, the oneness, the essence of light. It's the grandest scheme of all things. You know, when you realize that the ego is nothing more than a collection of responses of insecurities and fears and doubts, you can shed it. You know, and then you can really, truly find your true self. The ego isn't real. It's just this character on a stage acting out, right? It's you got to realize that there's this other higher self that you can let go of that ego and let God be in control. And then you really can let that create your reality, your higher reality. So, again, going back to that amazing statement by Marianne Williamson, our deepest fear is not that we are weak. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is that our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? You are a child of God. Your playing your small self does not serve the world. We are liberated from our own fear. Our presence automatically liberates other. So let's go into a meditation here. And let's sit comfortably and see if you can sit with your spine erect here. And let's take a few wonderful deep breaths of spirit, okay? Breathe in that presence of spirit. Ask for the I am, that I am presence be with us as we breathe in the light and release anything that is of lesser concerns. We breathe in the love and we feel our heart expanding at being recognized. Just let's say, release anything that is not of pure love in this moment. Breathe in that presence, the presence that carries the oneness of all, the God self within. Go to the soul now. Let's go to that, our soul within, and find that place of peace. Let's put our whole life into that light right now, there within our soul, and allow it to be bathed with the power of the greater you, the God self, the energy of all, the source and the resource. Let go of anything that is not of God's light and love. Let God be in control. Allow yourself to be healed and whole. Believe this in your heart and soul. Right now, in this very moment, God is here with you. Love is here with you. Peace is here with you. Light is here with you. Breathe in that light. Breathe in that peace. Breathe in that love that you need. And realize that you are indeed a beloved of God. You are part of the one great source of life. And you have more gifts than you've ever known. Thy will, not mine, be done. Now ask for yourself to be of service to that light and love. Ask for yourself to be able to fulfill your destiny, and that your greater self can be at work in your life. Know that you are indeed an instrument of God's will. So when you're spinning out of control, you can just take in a deep breath and know that you can smile and remember the simple phrase, let go, let go, let God be in control. Now, slowly come out of meditation and allow yourself to feel how you feel right now. Feel yourself as connected to that greatest source for good. Realize that you are your greater self. I'm going to say a peace prayer of St. Francis that's so beautiful. Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. Where there is sadness, joy. O Divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive, it is in pardoning that we are pardoned, and it is in dying that we are born to eternal life. I thank you so much for taking some time to experience the greater you. And I'll close with the Aramaic version of the Lord's Prayer. Father, Mother of the cosmos, shimmering light of all, focus your light within us as we breathe your holy breath. Enter the sanctuary of our hearts, uniting within us the sacred rays of your power and beauty. Let your heart's desire unite heaven and earth through our sacred union. Help us to fulfill what lies within the circle of our lives today. Forgive our secret fears as we freely choose to forgive the secret fears of others. Let us not enter into forgetfulness tempted by false appearances. For from your astonishing fire comes the holy song, which is truly the song of love, the song of light. And that song sanctifies all, renewed eternally in our lives and throughout creation. We seal these words in our hearts, committed in trust and faith. I thank you for listening. Today's talk was based on Spiritual Mind Power Affirmations by Dr. Masters. And I have a site, Mystical Perspectives, which also carries these talks. May you have a blessed day.